Francesco Maria Guazzo, from the Compendium Maleficarum, Book 3, Chapter 4, of the Divine and Spiritual Remedies, Section 8, of the Guardian Angel. Ferdinand of Castile, the historian of the Order of St. Dominic, relates the following. At Vuzela, a town in the district of Coimbra, was born one Giles of noble parents. Whilst he was still but a youth, owing to his own natural talents and family influence, he obtained no less than 3 rich benefices and also a priory. But now he abandoned himself to every vice. He was well versed in the humane sciences, and determined to acquire a complete knowledge of philosophy and medicine, thinking that this would provide him with greater opportunity to practice his iniquities. Accordingly, he set out for Paris with that object in view. On his way he fell in with a demon in human shape, and his evil traveling companion, who knew him well, though Giles did not know what he was, by degrees began to ask questions, and when he heard the purpose of his journey, he said, "Why do you not rather listen to me? I will give you knowledge which is both easy to acquire, and is chiefly of use for obtaining those honors and pleasures which you have in mind, being the very perfection of all medicine. It is necromancy, I mean." With these words, he persuaded Giles and led him away to a vast cavern near the city of Toledo, where he was joyfully met and received by men and demons in human form. And they entered the cavern. Not only was an oath of secrecy exacted from him, but he was made to swear perpetual allegiance and homage. Yet he did this full willingly, confirming his promise with a paper signed with his own blood. For 7 years after this, he deeply studied the black arts and magic, and then proceeded to Paris, where in a short time he made marvelous progress among the followers of Hippocrates and obtained the degree of doctor. He began to give way to viler and viler enormities and sins, and rushed headlong from crime to crime, so that it was doubtful which waxed the greater, the fame of his learning or the infamy of his wickedness. But oh, the goodness of God, for since he could not lead him by gentleness, he would have him by force. Behold, there came a horseman brandishing a spear, and looking at the miserable man with an angry countenance, cried to him threateningly, "Leave this life and these evil ways, and turn again to the practice of good." Giles was seized with a sudden panic, but as soon as it had passed, he was unwilling to change his manner of life, and returned to wallow in his filth. 3 days later, the same horseman appeared looking even more terrible, and not only used the same threatening words, telling him to change his manner of life, but pierced his breast with the spear, wounding it slightly. This broke his spirit, and he said, "I yield myself. I shall do what you command, Lord." You would have said that he was Saul fallen prostrate upon the ground. He fully determined to give himself entirely to God, and, obeying some inner impulse which, as I think, was inspired by his guardian angel who had appeared to him, resolved to join some religious order. In this mind he started back for Paris, and while he was passing through Palencia, where the Dominican brothers were then building a monastery, he felt a sudden wish to observe the work. He saw men of evident sanctity and learning, some of them aged and enfeebled, who had formerly been delicately nurtured, mixing mortar, cutting wood, shaping stone, and bearing loads upon their shoulders with the greatest cheerfulness and alacrity. He wished to join them, and at once asked to be admitted, and was granted his request. He fulfilled his novitiate under the spur of a great hope of future sanctity, and after some years was sent to Santarém in Portugal, where he increased in prayer and in his victory over himself. The one regret which tortured him was that the obscene and execrable paper was still in the possession of the demon. Therefore he commended himself the more fervently to the Queen of Heaven, praying not without tears and frequently sighing for some remedy for this evil. What can the Mother of Mercy deny to one who prays in such a manner? One day, as he was praying with great fervor in a chapel of the church, there appeared to him a demon of terrifying aspect, howling dismally, who made an outcry against him, petulantly reminding him of the allegiance he had vowed and the benefits he had received. At last, after many idle and impudent threats, he said, "I shall pay you for your monasticism and the violence which compels me to restore to you this paper, for you will never cease to regret it." He then threw the paper down at the feet of Giles and vanished. Giles took up the paper and tore it to bits, but the demon's threat was not in vain, for he tormented him for more than 7 years after, in a marvelous manner. Without reckoning his other vexations, he assumed the likeness of a certain friar who had dwelt in the same monastery, and so plagued Giles with every domestic discomfort that can possibly be imagined. After suffering this, Giles at last, in grief that the evil should lurk hidden, and that the brother, as he thought him, should so continually offend against God, took the matter to the prior, and asked to be sent elsewhere, telling him the reason. Upon this, the matter was brought to light, and the calumniator, being exposed and now for the first time overcome, not, as before, by Giles but by them all, ceased to torment his victor. Giles lived on, and was famous not only for his many virtues, but for various miracles. In the year 1265, he left this world to be born again in heaven, and was buried at Santarem, where he is worshipped as a saint. See what a mighty protection against demons there is in the Virgin Mother of God, and what inducement to a good life in a man's guardian angel. John of Salisbury writes as follows: "In my boyhood I was sent to learn the Psalms from a priest who unfortunately was given to crystal gazing. One day he made me sit at his feet with one of my companions, who was rather older than I. After having uttered certain spells in order to use us in those profane mysteries, so that we might be able to tell him what he asked, he rubbed our fingernails with some oil or holy ointment, and we gazed at them, as also into a highly polished and shining bowl. After the priest had pronounced some strange names which seemed to me, merely by reason of the horror I felt at them, to be the names of demons, and had muttered some adjurations, which cannot have been in the name of God, my companion told him that he had seen certain ghostly and cloud-like figures, whereas I was so blind to them that I saw nothing but my fingernails, and the bowl, and such things as had before been visible to me. From that time I was considered to be of no use for these divinations, and I was forbidden to come near them, as being an hindrance to their sacrilege, and every time they determined to practice these mysteries I was kept away from them, as an impudent. Thus did God, as I think, through my guardian angel, show favor to me in my childhood, and from that day the horror which I conceived for this crime increased as I grew older, and was but the more deeply printed upon my soul by the miserable end to which I saw many such diviners come. For I have never known one who did not die before his time, or through such extraordinary mischance, or by the hands of his enemies, not to speak of others whom I have seen with my own eyes stricken to the ground by the vengeance of heaven and destroyed. Yet I must mention two, of whom one was this priest I speak of, and the other a certain deacon who fled in terror from the horrors of the magic crystal, one to a chapter of canons and the other to a cell at Cluny, where they assumed the religious habit, and from that time I have felt great compassion for those two poor men who have suffered even more than the rest of their companions. For this and other installments of the Sources of Sophiurgy, series, please feel free to like and subscribe and hit the bell notification icon so that you can be notified of when the next installment is uploaded. And I hope that in sharing these with you all, that they may bring good fruit, good spiritual fruit to your lives. I'm Ignotus Amicus. Ave Maria.